Okay, so this morning I've just got a nice ripe Polish. I started that about 16 hours ago. And I'm just gonna make a focaccia ciabatta dough today. So I haven't decided, I might make focaccia, I might make ciabatta out of this. I'm gonna do this all by hand. So this is a dough you could do on the mixer, but we're also gonna just do it by hand. So if you don't have a mixer at home, then you don't need one. So I'm basically calculating 0 friction factor into this. These guys were at about 20 degrees today. So I'm going for about 24. And so I did my water around 30 to 33 degrees Celsius. Okay. So usually when I mix, even if I was mixing this pre-ferment to go into the mixer, I usually pour that on top, my pre-ferment first, and that really loosens up your Polish or pre-ferment from the bowl. But since today I'm gonna go everything into here. Hopefully this bowl is big enough. I'm just gonna do about half the water there and just get the rest of my ingredients in. And I become the mixer. If you are gonna do this on the mixer, it's about probably 2 to 3 minutes on first speed, or sorry, about 6 minutes on first speed, and then just a couple minutes on second speed, just to help develop the dough a little bit. So just a short mix on here. Okay, so that's been 45 minutes. See, the dough is kind of flowed out. It's still quite loose. So this is the focaccia recipe that's on your recipe file on D2L. So I believe that one says to give a fold 3 times every 45 minutes. But it really depends on the strength of your dough. Right now you can see the dough's not that developed, and the gluten development here is going to come from the folding and fermentation, bulk fermentation, rather than mixing. So this should give us lots of very open crumb structure, as well as a good flavor on the dough. So this, I'm going to get my hands really wet. I'm going to rotate this way to do the fold. Some people fold from here to here to here to here, and then flip it over. And you can see even when I flip that over how much more tighter the dough has already become, but I don't have good surface tension yet. Okay. Generally when I do this is a small amount of dough, and this is a nice heavy container. If I'm doing this at work, sometimes I'll have somebody hold the container down, or I do it really, really fast. And when I do it really fast, if I'm folding, I just start at one end, fold, 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 done. Okay, so right now still fairly loose structure. Even if you pick up, you can see that we are starting to get gluten, but it's going to take I'm probably going to go like an extra fold on this today just to build up the strength, especially since I just mixed it by hand. Okay, so this has been an hour and a half, so we're going to do our second fold. You can already see before I do the fold here that there's a lot more gluten structure than the last time. The dough hasn't flowed out as much, and you can actually see some nice fermentation bubbles starting to happen. I always do this with nice wet hands. I don't pour all this excess water into here, but I do get my hands wet, and then the dough doesn't stick to my hands. If it starts sticking to your hands, just go back to the water, dip, and back in. So I'll release from the sides, and then 1, 2, give it a bit of a stretch, and then a fold. And then usually what I do at the end, you can see there's already a much nicer structure. Again, you can pick up, you can see here that we're getting some nice gluten, and then just gather it back in, create the surface tension. And we'll definitely go one more. We might do 2 more. Okay, so now you can see the dough has a lot more gluten structure to it. Give it one extra fold, but again, I can maybe even go one more on it too. Sometimes with ciabatta, I just pour this out onto the table, divide and bake without proofing. This one I will give, once I divide it, I'm gonna give it a final proof. Lots of flour on the table for here, okay? And then when I open this up again, now I'm gonna go more with flour rather than water onto the dough. And don't be shy with the flour here. Get some on your hands, on your fingers. And this is a small amount of dough. If it's a larger amount of dough, I would pour it out onto the table. But with this here, I'm just gonna pick it up kind of like an accordion, bring it over onto the table. So the important thing I find with dividing these doughs is I don't want to actually, I find when you go to the scale and you start cutting up a lot of pieces, because we didn't develop the gluten and it's much more hydrated and more, I just love this dough. It feels like a pillow. I want to go to sleep. But when you go to divide it and try to scale exactly, you end up with lots of little pieces like that, and then it destroys your surface tension. So generally what I do is when I bring it onto the table like this, I just use some flour, make sure there's lots of flour on the table, make sure that it's still able to move around, and just square it off, and then you can divide it. So today I'm gonna make a ciabatta loaf, and I'm gonna take the other half and make a focaccia. If I'm doing all focaccia, I'll do this onto an oiled tray and just dimple it in with my fingers immediately too. So it depends what you're doing. Bench scraper, take this, sharp cut, push apart, sharp cut, push apart. Okay, so I did okay on my dividing there. I'm gonna make this one into, I think, my ciabatta, and this one into my focaccia. This, you can see, has a fair amount of proof. When you push into the side, you can see it's springing back and holding the indentation. I can actually go with this one directly into the oven, but I am gonna let it relax a little bit because I'm gonna get my focaccia set up. Okay, so now that I've divided it, if you are dividing a lot more, you'll find that this dough is sticky, so you can always throw a little bit of flour in there, and then that makes it not so sticky. Ciabatta means slipper or old beat up slipper, so kind of looks like grandpa's slippers a little bit, so that's the name for the dough. And this bread was, I guess, originated more in the 80s in Italy too, so it's not something that's, probably there was versions of it, but not too long ago. Oven's ready, that's awesome. When you pick it up, again, accordion style, bring it up, and then just transfer it over on here gently. You have that nice shape of your loaf for later on. I'm gonna let that proof a little bit at room temperature, because I don't have a proofer at home. And then this remaining dough here, I actually want to get some of that flour off. Usually, again, with focaccia, I don't use flour. And I'm gonna bring it over to this tray. You can bake it in something like this if you want. You can bake it in sheet pans, full-size sheet pans if you like. When I do my focaccia, I call this the kitty cat. I want to dimple this, but you know, like a kitty when he's giving you the paw. My wife's laughing right now, like what an idiot. But I feel like that's the best way to describe it, because I don't want to beat up the dough too much. I've got some nice herb olive oil here, so I'm just gonna actually get in there with the oil now, and you can see there are beautiful fermentation bubbles kind of puffing up there. So what I don't want to do is totally degas this dough, but I'm just gently stretching this out and dimpling it, and then I will let this rest for about 30 minutes at room temperature. Sometimes it depends on the dough, how long it's fermented for. Sometimes in a proofer, if I put it in the proofer, sometimes it's almost an hour in the proofer before I go to bake it, because I want to have lots of nice bubbles on there. That looks good, eh? Okay, but the little kitty cat, okay? The little dimples there. Hey. Okay, so see you later, bubble. I'll move that one out of the way for now. So I don't want to start squishing it so much where I'm forcing it. When I do my final dimpling on here, and this I might not push it too much further than this, then I can relax it a little bit more into the sides. So I'm going to give it about a half an hour, and then we'll be pretty much ready to bake. Okay, so baking at home, you can see I have a stone in the oven that I use for like a hearth. But before I go to put my bread in, especially lean doughs, remember we got to steam. But I like to pre-steam my oven to get some moisture in there before I load. So, and if I'm doing other bread throwing in a score, I'll do that like before I score. You can see this one here, I'm just going to unwrap my couche. If you have like a dish towel at home, that works well. This helps protect it from drying out. You can see the product now is still like a little tight, but it is well proofed and ready to go into the oven. And it looks like Grandpa's old slipper. Okay, then over here, the focaccia, we still have some nice bubbles going. I'm just gonna get in there with my hands, get some more oil on my fingers, and just gently dimple again, okay? Sometimes there's like an in-between here, like you definitely wanna do enough pressure that you're getting those dimples in there, because if you don't do enough, then it just poofs up a lot on you. But you don't want to destroy a lot of that beautiful fermentation bubbles. And I'm just going to work it just a little bit with this amount of dough just to the sides of the parchment paper that I have on the tray. So just with my fingers, and now it's time to load. I'm going to load this guy first. Okay, just on this side, just like you guys do at school. I'm going to pop this over here. Usually focaccia I don't steam, but this one I will. I'm just going to slide that over a bit there. Chef's got bread hands, so don't worry about that too much. I'm going to give a little bit more steam here at the end, mostly on for that ciabatta, for the benefit of that. And then we'll come back in about 20 minutes. Okay, so that's been half an hour. At 20 minutes, I opened up my oven and vented. Shape's okay. I could have let these proof a little bit longer. My hands are freezing right now, so I'm just gonna go like that. Bring it up top, put it up there. And this guy I'm just gonna lift out, and we're gonna bring it up top too. And I'm gonna slide off just to let it cool down. So sometimes when you're baking at home, you don't get the same results. This looks pretty poofy. You can see I could have even dimpled a little bit more, and the dough is still pretty strong and pretty tight too. So, but it smells pretty good, right? So
yeah.
So we're just gonna brush some oil on top of the focaccia. You can listen closely. It's singing a little bit. When you hear the cracking crust, that's means you got a nice chewy crust on this. As this cools down, the steam's gonna go to the outside and soften up the crust. And hopefully we got a pretty good crumb structure on here. But I'm gonna put lots of this nice herb oil on top. And then we'll have a little snack. Okay, so something that's, you don't need a mixer at home to do this. Just need some flour, water, salt, and yeast. And then you can work with these nice hydrated doughs.